Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session here. I'm Saurabhishwa Sen from Catalyst, welcoming all of you once more. To start off our session, a little bit about Catalyst for everyone's benefit. At Catalyst, since 2011, we have been focused to train, guide, mentor students, working professionals to step up into careers in the development sector. Over the last 10 years at Catalyst, we have been mentoring, guiding students for the bachelor's, master's, as well as the MPhil, PhD entrances interviews into the social science programs and fellowship opportunities offered by the colleges and universities in India as well as abroad. Catalyst continues to produce high committed quality prospective professionals in a range of social and human development sectors, law and justice, prospective professionals in a range of social and human development affairs, epidemiology, clinical psychology, education, vocational skill, human resource management, media and cultural studies, rural and urban development, livelihoods and social entrepreneurship, climate change, disaster management, regulatory governance, focused work on women, children, adolescent, youth, aged, disability studies, inclusivity and sustainability, and last but not the least, public policy. Speaking of public policy, I'm very, very happy to introduce to all of you today Dr. Nalini Kaushik. Thank you so much, Nalini, firstly, to take out your time and be with us on a Saturday. And as the little or more that I know about you and your work is that you are always on your toes, literally, in terms of the type of space you are working with. So to help everyone understand Nalini's work, I would like to tell all of you that Dr. Nalini Kaushal is a medically trained public policy practitioner and professional with an interest in the access dimension of health. Dr. Nalini counsels healthcare, pharmaceuticals, and medical technology clients on diverse regulatory and political issues to bring the required coherence to policy challenges. I must admit, one of the most talked about issues during these prevailing times for sure. Nalini also works extensively with the space concerning government regulations and patient outcomes. As a specialist in health advocacy and research, government affairs and communication, she works at the intersection of policy and political outcomes using interdisciplinary approaches and stakeholder collaborations. Dr. Nalini is the managing director at DevUp Global, a health policy advocacy firm, and also is a founder of an advocacy platform, Bleed Equal, that is working towards normalizing menstrual health by raising awareness and building partnerships. In the past, she served as the head policy and partnerships at Aquitus Consulting Private Limited. In addition to this, Dr. Nalini has also worked with clients like WHO, CRO, PHFI, PPHF, pharmaceutical organizations, and health technology firms. Some of the key areas of her work include antimicrobial resistance, access to medicines and IP rights, rare diseases policy, access to affordable RH insulin, TMR for medical devices in India. Dr. Nalini Kaushik holds a master's in public policy from National Law School of India University, NLSIU Bangalore, and bachelor's in dental surgery from MDU Haryana. Nalini, thank you so much for being with us and being keen to share your story with so many of these eager participants to know more about this very intrinsically growing field of public policy. Before I pass on the baton to Nalini, I would obviously request everyone to uh, be very, very free in interacting with Nalini today. Like she was requesting me that, she is very keen to interact with all of you. And that is why she felt that it would be important that each of you ask your set of questions to her. So to ask the questions, you're most welcome to use the chat box to your benefit to raise the questions, which we would love to take whenever it's possible for Nalini to answer. The other aspect which I've been trying to speak of right from the beginning is feel free to keep your videos on. I know like we are all in a virtual setting, but maybe keeping videos on would help Nalini to have a more humane conversation, when she is presenting her perspectives, right? So, Nalini, to start off with, I would like to set the ball rolling by, of course, wanting to very eagerly know about your story. Like I did mention in the introduction, but there is still so much to know. So if you can maybe help us understand a little bit about your story, the way your career trajectory has evolved over the years, and what drew your attraction, inspiration, attention towards the domain of public policy.
Right. Thank you, Sarveshwar. First of all, thank you so much for that great introduction. And I'm really glad that, I'm here today by medium of this platform because, I see the audience today are, the students who are aspiring for a domain like public policy, or maybe, some who are starting their journey into it. So I think it's a privilege to be, in middle of all of you today. And, if my journey or anything, that I speak today would be of any help to, our viewers, I think that would be a big, a plus point for my career or the transitions that I have taken. It's always about inspiring and co-learning. So thank you so much for having me here today. And okay, so now beginning, with the question that you just pointed out. Thank you for asking that question because I think, as we transition more into the professional space, those are, the basic questions we sort of, no matter how much they have intrigued us, we sort of kind of, distance, we keep moving distant from those answers that, why we even started the journey in the first place. So, so at the outset, I would like to say that, my professional transitions are essentially, the wherever I am today in my career, it's essentially a product of my personal transitions and the environment in which I was interacting, be it at an individual level or be it, as a student. So wherever I was placed, in different circumstances. So to put things into perspective, so I studied dentistry. I did a 5 years program in dental surgery, post which I dropped for 1 year, and then I started my journey into public policy. So, in the hindsight, today when I feel that, my transition seems very natural to me. However, it was nowhere, as simple as it might be sounding right now. So, after school, I started dentistry program, and then, for 5 years, I grappled with the question that, what after this? Because every time when I felt that, I imagined that picture in my head that one day I would be sitting in a dental clinic diagnosing patients with dental problems, etc. That picture itself seemed really incomplete to me. It didn't sort of satisfy me at an intellectual level, and I really didn't know where it was coming from. I couldn't connect the dots as a 22-year-old naive student, and I had a very limited environment of interaction because I was only interacting with people of my field. Everybody who was, from the sciences background or medical professional, right? Profession. And I didn't have that kind of, environment where I could, kind of think whatever I was thinking from different perspectives. So hence I didn't know the answer. So when I completed my, graduation, I sort of dropped for 1 year, and I started to think that, what really I want to do, because that image of just, practicing as a dentist didn't really satisfy me intellectually. And that's when I started really interacting with many people from different domains. I sometimes I was interacting with people who were legally trained but doing some social policy work. I interacted with many people, like some of my friends who were from social sciences background, and other people, in fact, who were even practicing public policy abroad. So with that interaction, in fact, I found that there's a field which is called public policy, because 8-10 years back, public policy was extremely new to India. There were just like, I can just count the numbers on my fingers, that there were just like 2 or 3 colleges in India who introduced the course in public policy, right? So with that all confusion, when I started interacting with people from different disciplines, I realized, where that entire thinking of, not being fulfilled from a career in sciences was coming from. So, because, I was actually interacting on day-to-day basis with patients. And most of my patients, they came from a, very specific kind of, economic background. So when your patient comes and tells you that, like coming to a dentist versus earning a one day, they were daily wage earners, right? So when your patient tells you that I am a daily wage earner, earning those 3, 4 or 500 rupees each day is much more important to me than coming to you for a dental problem, you know so that really hit me, and while I was a student for 5 years, I didn't really, I was still grappling with, I didn't realize the intensity of it, despite knowing that yes, there's a problem here what this person is talking about. Slowly, actually, when I started interacting, I realized that access to healthcare is a function of economics. It's not only a function of a trained doctor. Yes, doctors are really important, but access is a larger conversation. Access is really, is dependent on politics. It is dependent on government policies. It is dependent on, law, economics, affordability, and so much more. And it was only when I entered law school, I did my masters in public policy from National Law School. It was then when I really kind of started actualizing that feeling of that I need to understand health from various different lenses. I was able to constructively channelize my experience of 5 years in a dental in a medical school. And then I gained the kind of skill set where I first understood, because I entered, I was in an area where I grappled with a lot of problems. I didn't have the environment to sort of think to the answers, or I didn't even have the tools or the skill set with me to understand that where those questions were coming from, right? Then my transition was into public policy, where at least after a training or an academic training of 2 years, I at least understood, or I had the skill set to connect the dots. I had the skill set to put things into perspective, right? So this was essentially, my journey from medical school to, a law school, where I now, as a product of both, I combine both the skill sets and I apply that at work. So, in a nutshell, this is my journey into, public policy. Thank
That's very
you.
interesting. That's very interesting, Nalini. I would like to know that uh, I would rather ask a very basic question, which a lot of times we take it for granted. If you can share with your understanding, what is the public policy space in terms of an academic program? uh,
Hmm.
Mostly about, like, I'm just kind of like the way you have seen it, the way you have studied it, because a lot of times students have these very basic queries that, what
Yeah.
is public policy, right? When we study it, like, I know
Right.
public policy as, say, what the government is trying to achieve,
Yeah.
but when we study public policy, what is it about, right? So if you would like to share some points on that. Yeah.
Okay. So this is, it's a complex question.
Right.
And I say so, Sarveshwar, is out of again my experience, because
Right.
public policy as a field and how you experience it professionally is in a way different then a course in public policy. And I think in the entire conversation today, my entire focus is to explain this to students. And this is not a negative point about public policy. This is the beauty of it, right? First of all, again, like many times I have said that public policy is different from any professional course we take.
Right.
uh, a training of a doctor, a training of an engineer, training of a lawyer, many, those conventional fields, they give you a skill set and you as it is apply, of course with certain
Yeah.
tweaking here and there. Public policy will only give you, or the academic training in public policy will teach you the theory of it. It will teach you theory from different perspectives. Public policy, an academic course, will give you the tools, right? Now, as a practitioner, it is always on you that how creatively you can sometimes combine those tools, sometimes selectively choose that if, okay, this is the context of my problem, which framework or what tool, should I be applying here? For example, in a public policy or a public policy courses, I mean, more or less how they are, designed in India. Most of the colleges, you would study introduction to public policy, you will study public administration,
Yeah.
you study economics, right? And then you study, many other aspects, sometimes, health policy, environment policy, etc. So now the course is only trying to tell you that these are the frameworks, these are the specialization areas, right? And how do you combine the two? So the course is trying to tell you that, right? Now it is, when you come out of your college, that's the framework. And I think initially what really happens to a lot of students also, that students get confused that this is what I studied, why
Right.
am I doing this now? It is only because when you are in the in field, or when you are working as a professional, you have to only creatively utilize your tools to bring solution to the policy problems you are facing. And I think the diversity of it and the intersectionality of it, I would be talking more in the due course of our conversation. But I think in a nutshell, if I can say that public policy profession in India, or the public policy training in India, is essentially about giving you the certain basic skill sets, which could be dealing with data, which could be dealing with numbers, which could be dealing with certain context or the political frameworks of the country, etc., etc. How do you apply all of that in the sort of in your professional day-to-day life is all up to you, and how creative we are. That is one. And two, I think it is also um, it's a very dynamic field. And that is why if you see all public policy courses as opposed to any other course, academic course, the focus is so much on internships, when you are a student. Why every institution is so I think focused on giving that internship experience to students? It is
Right.
essentially because they know that we are trying to provide the academic theoretical frameworks. So we are providing as an institution the static knowledge, which more or less doesn't change. However, the students, once they graduate, they would be placed in a dynamic environment, dynamic world, dynamic problem situations. So it is, the internships are essentially your playground to witness that as you're a student. So that's essentially what the entire academic training of public policy is essentially all about.
Right. Right. Thanks. I think that's quite interesting. That it's like almost like an open book, like of a field where
Yeah.
you have the ingredients with you, but then you have to use them, apply them to the best suited way, way
Absolutely.
forward. Right. Um, you also mentioned some of the skills, like you mentioned about data, you mentioned about certain aspects. A lot of aspirants keep asking us that what is it that I need to know, or what is it that I need to understand, or I should be good at if
Okay.
I want to be fit for, say, pursuing a public policy program? So do you have any specific answer to that for the benefit of the participants?
Okay. So to answer this question, the skill sets, again, this is a very subjective question because my answer is really dependent on the kind of policy environment,
Right.
policy actors, and the policy institutions I have interacted with.
Okay.
So, a culmination of all of that, what I can say that there are two ways to answer this question. One is the skill sets or the prerequisites which are required for a student who is entering an academic program of public policy, and there are then certain prerequisites which are important for somebody who is trying to enter the field of public
Right.
policy as a professional. So
Right.
first, to answer that, what is it for a student, I think very basic things. If you have an understanding or if you have an inclination towards social issues or social
Right.
problems, because there are a lot of problems that we keep facing, the policy problems, the social problems, day to day in our day to day lives as well. And what we see is the manifestation of problems actually. So whatever is happening at a political level, whatever is happening in the parliament, whatever happening is happening at the bilateral relationships, diplomacy, or anything which is of why health systems are failing, or in COVID we saw so many problems. That is all a manifestation of policy problems, right? Now, if you do not have, as an individual, if you do not have an inclination towards social issues, I think then you won't be able to relate to a lot of work that you do, right? And I think that interrelatability to the kind of work you do is really important to a discipline like public policy. So this
Right.
is one thing, and I think second would be the fluidity and the flexibility of understanding. Like I said, that public policy is everything from social to political to culture to economics to science and social sciences as well. It's huge. The spectrum of public policy is huge, right? And that's why you see anybody who, there is no criteria of a graduation program. Anyone, any kind of graduate can enter public policy, and that's the beauty of it, right? Now, if that is the openness of a program, hence understand that it requires a flexibility, because every right comes with a duty, right? So anything which is very open, you need to be extremely flexible and fluid about it as well. Meaning thereby that public policy training is going to give you tools. How you mix and match those tools in the work area or at the professional front lies only at you. Tomorrow, if you enter any kind of work area or organization, and if you are adamant about that, this is the tool I or the framework I studied, and this is what I'm going to apply, it may not work, because you might have to, what you studied in your urban policy, urban planning class, you might have to combine with econometrics and then apply it at work,
Right.
right? Or you might have learned something about media communications. You might have to apply that with the data that you have in hand,
Mm.
right? So that's the flexibility and fluidity at an individual level as a student, which is really required. So if you're entering public policy, these are two things I think that are really important for you to understand, because it's a multidimensional domain that you're trying to enter. So so for
Right.
students, I think this is very basic answer that I would like to say, that these two things. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thanks so much. Like, still, I'm kind of persisting with that question because there are a lot of participants who again ask us that how good do we need to be with numbers when we look at a program like public policy? Because, like, uh, you understand that many people are from backgrounds in which they did their maths last in the, say, class 10th, and a lot of them actually wanted to pursue humanities because they also wanted to move away from the
That's right.
mathematics.
Yes. I was one of
Now,
them.
right. So
Yeah.
since you were one of them, I think that kind of should add confidence to many of our participants that if you can give us an understanding that what is the numerical competency which you feel is the
Yeah.
basic requirement to be part of public policy as a career.
Right. Okay, so I think, yeah, so I think last, the answer that I was answering, it was more for students. I think the second part of what I was saying, that, there are certain skill sets which are slightly different. The inherent qualities are, of course, the same, the flexibility and, all of that. Inherent qualities of those traits are quite similar, but there are certain skill sets which are non-negotiable according to me. And in those non-negotiables, data is still secondary, and I'll tell you why. Because there is a qualitative research, there's a quantitative area, right? I am more from the qualitative side of the world. My understanding and my comfort with numbers is only what I was taught at a, at the course level. And of course I do understand a bit of if I have certain numbers, how to just interpret those numbers to my advantage or to whatever I'm trying to communicate. However, I think there are two other skills which I feel are much more important, and I'll describe that, again in detail. One is policy communication, and another is intersectionality. Now, for me, if and I'll tell you more about these two skills, but then if I'm trying to communicate something to my stakeholders, so for example, I'm interacting with a bureaucrat. I'm advocating for one particular policy that, okay, India does not have this XYZ policy, and we need this policy in India. What is really important is what kind of language I'm using to interact with the policymaker, because I might be putting the same message across to a doctor also, but the kind of language on the same area I would be using for a doctor would be slightly different. So the policy communication trait is really important for a policy maker or professionals in the public policy. Now, when I'm using that tool of policy communication, how do I use data? Right? That's where, in my personal experience, my understanding of data comes into play. Where, yes, when I have to explain that these are the gap areas, I have to show it through numbers. These are the kind of budgetary allocations, so I should know how to interpret the government of India's budget. That's the level of at least the basic understanding of numbers I should have. So I think these are very basic areas where I think in my personal experience, I use data. Having said that, of course, there are a lot of people who are really into data and public policy, because they are churning numbers every day to build evidences. They are they are data sciences people who are trained in public policy. So it is all up to an individual that what kind of domain in public policy really attracts you. Because please understand that public policy is a spectrum. It's a huge spectrum, and there is a huge classification and the diversity of stakeholders, policy issues, etc. So some of these policy issues might require only skills which are non data centric. However, there are certain areas which are highly data centric, even in health. So for example, I'm a health policy and government affairs person. I use only 10% of data or 15% of data. At the same time, somebody who is a health analyst would be doing 90% of data and just 10% of what I am doing, right? So it is only, an individual choice that how much and what kind of sub classification, or that part of policy that you want to enter into. And I think, don't be scared of numbers. Just have like a basic understanding of how to interpret it, which you are always taught in a program of public policy. And then it's all up to you, what kind of uh, area in public policy you want to choose. Yeah.
Right. Great, great. I think before we move ahead, I would like to request the participants that as of now, if anyone has any specific question to ask, feel free to write that in the chat box, or you can even use your microphone to ask uh, Nalini the question. Um, in fact, we had a question, Nalini, from Sudeshna right at the start of the session. She asks a question which, of course, is there on everyone's mind. Like, how do you see the sector gaining momentum in the coming years? So
Yeah,
that's what Sudeshna asks. So if you would like to take that question
yeah.
within your stride, Nalini.
Right. Okay. Thanks for asking this question, Sudeshna. And I think public policy, it's a field which is, the beauty is that, it's a very new field in India. It started only almost a decade ago, at least structurally and very professionally. It doesn't mean that it wasn't being practiced in India. It was still being practiced. However, the kind of momentum it gained in terms of establishing it as a particular professional domain is very new. That means that the demand is there, and demand is only going to increase. However, it is a very dynamic field. It is changing every day because it is so dependent on the environment. It is dependent on anything and everything which is happening, at all levels, be it at the social level, or be it at a political level, be it at a diplomacy level between various countries, right? So a field which is so dynamic, as it evolves, the demand will increase. Hence, will what will also increase is the expectation. So therefore, with the kind of skills, perhaps, we graduated 7, 8, 9 years back, I think the kind of expectation that people would have now have also increased. For example, take example of healthcare. In last 2 years, I think because of COVID, the entire health system's perceptions have changed. Not only at the government level, not only at the level of policymakers or people who were in the healthcare, everyone at in our homes also, our understanding of healthcare have increased. All of us know what is vaccination. All of us know what is herd immunity. You know, so the level of awareness on many things about healthcare have increased. Everybody knows what WHO is. Everybody knows what India, what US and China are doing, so they know the diplomacy level of the world. So these conversations have become, these are policy conversations. However, these conversations have become part of day to day conversations which we are talking at homes. Hence, imagine that, now public policy, this is all public policy. People who are talking about it, they may not know that they are talking public policy or they're talking health policy. However, these are the, basic aspects which make or which increase the demand of public policy. Because today, if you see, everybody wants, every organization, their demand for healthcare professionals or public policy professionals who understand these aspects that I just talked about have increased in last 1 or 2 years, because now they want to, work in these spaces. The international funding has increased in healthcare. Hence, the demand for people like us have increased. At the same time, now the expectation is that we come with much more nuanced skill sets as well, right? So I think the creativity quotient that now we have to bring on to the table, that onus, I mean, that could be like a sort of pressure as well, but that has also increased now. So yes, how I see shaping the career in public policy, yes, I think in my personal opinion, this is a very dynamic field which is increasing, the demand for which is increasing, and I think it is going to keep on increasing only in the future. But what will also increase with the demand is the expectation of the skill set that is being required out of us as well.
Right. I hope, Sudeshna, you are clear with the answer, and we move ahead. Um, Um, Nalini, there's a question from uh, Rodushi Das. She's asking that is a medical or pharmaceutical degree required, or is it advantageous for a degree in public policy with a track? Like, I think Rodushi wants to be in a track in health or epidemiology. So she's asking that whether a pharmaceutical degree or a medical degree, while applying to a program in public policy, will be advantageous.
Right. I think, okay, again, my first statement would be then again, it's very subjective. Um, I won't say that it is not. It would be helpful because if you are so focused from the day one that, health is an area you want to pursue, and you come from a background of somewhere, in any other, any dimension of health or pharmaceuticals, of course, hands down, it will be sort of, advantageous because you will have a clear focus in your head that this is what I need to learn, because of course in public policy will also give you the choice of lot of elective courses that you can choose. So you will be very focused that yes, this is what I want to study because it's going to help me with the my career in health policy in the future, right? So giving you an example is that I mean, this is I can again share more about my own transition, and how I made my decisions in law school, because I was very focused that health is what I want to pursue. But before I do that, I think anyone who is not from health background and wants to pursue health policy as a subject, again, not having the prerequisite or the prior knowledge is not a barrier. So never ever, I think, get demoralized with the fact that you have somebody in your batch or somebody around you who has a prior understanding of health, and will have an upper hand or upper advantage. It may or may not work in it. It may work like that initially, but in the longer run, what will really help is the kind of knowledge you acquire about health. So you might be coming from any, like, maybe you would be a history honor student, but then you're more interested in health. What you can do is that just start learning and understand the subject more, you know and then once you have that basic understanding, it all comes in the due course of time. Because even if you're a if you're a for instance a history honor student, you have a skill set of connecting the dots backwards, you know so don't think that you don't know the subject, which is health, but understand that at least you have a skill set of connecting the dots in periods and era, etc., etc. So just use the skills that you have to your advantage, because a person who is trained in economics would do the same. A person who, because a lot of economists who we see, they enter health as a specialization area in health policy. It's only because they have a skill set, they can churn numbers, and they can define, they can give meanings to the data and numbers, right? So they don't get afraid that, oh, we do not know health as a subject area or a specialized area. They come with the confidence that, okay, these are the this is a data set that I have in front of me, this is the prior knowledge of health that I require. They understand those health areas, and they give meaning to those numbers. So I think as much as advantageous having the knowledge of health is, it is equally I think good to not have the knowledge, because you can be more creative then with your skill sets and apply your creativity to that. Secondly, so when I was in law school, what I did was that I was very focused from the day one that I want to understand health, and I chose access to health, because it came very naturally to me. So all I wanted to do for 2 years was to understand that what affects access to healthcare. You know, so I studied intellectual property, I studied competition law, I studied everything, even media communications and everything, to see that what is happening to health. So when media defines health, what is media doing with health, in communications? What is intellectual property rights doing in healthcare? All of that. However, and that really sort of helps me now even today, in my in everyday day-to-day work that I do, that intersectionality that really helps me. of bringing the learnings from different sectors and different areas into the health. However, as a student, I also knew that uh, being in an academic institution was my safe place. If I fall, I have had my college to fall onto. So I wanted to experiment. So I kept experimenting. I experimented with courses like, urban policy. I experimented with, econometrics and, so much, because I felt that, once I'm out of my college, I will not get the same environment and the training to experiment. So as much as I wanted to understand health, I just experimented and explored that, let me just learn and just experience what different people are saying about public policy. So these are two things which I really sort of liked when I was, and I really applied to my training when I was pursuing that, and I think that kind of helped me as well.
I hope, Rodoshi, your question has been answered. Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Um, of course, Nalini, like you spoke very, very lucidly about the type of work you are doing in the health space. It's just is that the type of creativity which you also mentioned uh, to the participants, which is very interesting, that how fluidic and flexible a public policy program could be.
yeah,
And keeping that in mind, we are all very keen to know more about Bleed Equal. I know that's your like literally your baby, and like you've kind of created that. You're nurturing it. Um, I saw its website. It has got a very interesting logo. Very very sort of there is a I must admit that there is a strong communication in the entire usage of the fonts. So if you can help us understand that. How are you envisaging Bleed Equal uh, in the coming days ahead? I know it's still very early days. You have
yeah.
been mentioning that to me, but as of now, what can we expect with Bleed Equal in our society?
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's so. I think thanks for saying. Yeah, of course, it's more like a baby that I'm trying to raise right now, because it just started. The journey started at least on a public platform 3 months back, and I only started with the idea just last year. However, Bleed Equal have roots in my own journey, and my journey as a menstruator, but also as my journey as somebody who's a public policy person, my journey as somebody who's been in the corporate sector and I've worked. And as a menstruator, we all, and I think all the menstruators, who might be even listening to the conversation today, we have an experience, you know, and that's my own individual, my personal experience, which sometimes I didn't even have the avenues to express, and all of that bottled up into something at the back of my mind, because I was also working in a similar space, and I felt that it has to take certain shape. And before I get into the personal journey story, I think the policy side of Bleed Equal is that and I think this kind of thinking might help the students as well, that look at the global funding. If you look at the national programs or even the international programs in menstrual health, just think in your head that who are we working for, and it is not wrong. So most of our focus of the national health programs and the international programs on menstruation and menstrual health is essentially for adolescent girls. It is essentially for women or girls who are who represent a certain age bracket. One. Two, the international focus of menstruation is menstrual health hygiene, sanitation, right? But then and this is, and then this entire, why do you think that this entire thing exists? It is because the UN funding on menstruation is for adolescent girls. It is for sanitation, right? So wherever the global funding is coming from, wherever the national funding is coming from, everybody is going to be working in that area, right? That becomes a focus area. Now, my problem is that while all of those focus areas that, all the other actors and the institutions are focusing on are important. Talking about menstruation to adolescent girls is really important. Talking about menstrual hygiene is really important. But isn't menopause equally menstruation? Isn't PCOS or PCOD equally menstruation? But why do not we have data on PCOS, PCOD, which is such a growing? Every one girl in six, 1 in 6 girls in India have complaints regarding hormonal issues, which is like PCOS, PCOD, etc. With those kind of things, and we do not have any data. What about mental health and menstrual health? Aren't people who are placed in the corporate sector, aren't they menstruators? Don't they have menstrual health issues? Somebody like I'm might, I'm from the development sector. I go in the field. I have a very a very, different experience of menstruation. It's not an easy experience. Aren't doctors who are working 48 or 72 hours on a stretch, who are stacking one pad over other, you know, who are so prone to toxic shock syndrome, don't they have menstrual health needs? So my worry was that, yes, the global policy funding and the global conversations are focused at one area. My problem was that because of that focus, many other things are getting ignored from the conversation of menstrual health. Now, these are not easy conversations to have because here we do not have funding. A trans person who also menstruates, it may not be easy for that person because, we are not giving them space, neither at home nor outside, to come and talk about it. And lastly, I'm a medically trained person. I studied human physiology for 2 years, human anatomy. We were never taught about trans physiology, you know. And I've spoken to so many other friends of mine who are even from MBBS backgrounds, and many people that how well versed are you with the subject of trans menstruation and trans physiology? I mean, the answers are really scary. So my entire, and it's like what really affected me was that, let us not leave the conversations, because if again menstruation or if menstrual health is a spectrum, then a 13-year-old is equally important to a 50-year-old who's going through menopause, or a 40-year-old going through menopause. The needs of each age group or people are equally important. So this is the whole idea around Bleed Equal, is that, while we are working with adolescent girls, we are working with girls or women who are in that area, age groups. I don't want to leave any conversation behind. And because I do not want to leave any area or conversation or focus area behind, I'm working on, getting the data. My focus is a bit also on research that, wherever data does not exist, we are trying to churn out the data. And we are also trying to, sensitize people and do a bit of capacity building in whichever context about different aspects of menstruation. So this is what the whole journey of Bleed Equal is, or the background of Bleed Equal is. Yes, of course, in the near future, what we are starting is that, we are doing a lot of conversations and, certain capacity building programs with women in, or, not just women, menstruators in workspace, or in, in work environments, because even they feel left out that, if I'm working in the corporate sector, I do have menstrual health needs. And if I'm in my menopausal age, I do have menstrual needs, but then they are not equipped with the knowledge. So we are doing certain capacity building programs there. We are doing certain studies as well to understand, that would essentially to understand the data points of menstrual health needs of teachers, because up until now we are training teachers on menstrual health so that they can impart that knowledge to adolescent girls. We forget that teachers are also menstruators. We forget that many teachers might be in the menopausal age themselves. So, what about the menstrual health needs of them? And if the menstrual health needs are not taken care of, it also reflects on your mental health. So when teachers are so important, why do not we focus on that? But again, we do not have numbers, we do not have the data. So I mean, that's where we are currently focusing on. We are trying to get the data, and we are also doing certain sensitization, awareness, and capacity building programs for stakeholders placed in different context, basically.
Wow, I think that sounded truly, truly very futuristic, fascinating, and also, I must admit, very concerning in the same place. Coming from a non-menstruator, in me and many of us, I would say, who don't menstruate, uh, we would love to be part of a discussion forum, a conversation where that conditioning, as Nalini mentioned, can be really spread wide and deep. Very interestingly, the role of teachers, which Nalini mentions, is always supreme in shaping our society. And all of us, whichever way we are established, we owe so much to our teachers. Yet, as she mentions, that amongst the teachers who menstruate, their requirements in terms of the physiological evolution that happens in their systems, right, which is very scientific otherwise, are possibly not accounted for, if I could understand that clearly. So I would like to, throw open questions to the participants. Like, I had a question actually, Nalini, from one of our participants, Ruchika. She writes to me that uh, she's asking after the type of impact that one can create as a public policy uh, maker. She's using that word, maker. Uh, so if you would like to talk of the impact, Nalini, I'm sure you have highlighted a lot in our conversation, but say, I think Ruchika wants to know specifically some types of milestone that a public policy professional might be looking forward to.
So I think best would be for me to answer this question by means of an example. So maybe,
Yeah,
I'll just take the liberty of, sharing the kind of work I have done. So
surely.
for example, antimicrobial resistance, India. So if you don't know, so AMR, basically antimicrobial resistance, is basically, people who are resistant to antibiotics, right? So now this is a big problem because we just have some handful of antibiotics with us, and with the kind of production systems are in pharmaceuticals, and of course how the scientific discoveries are taking place, we haven't seen any new antibiotic of late, right? Now the problem is, what if somebody is absolutely resistant to antibiotics? That means the person would die. I mean, in very plain words, because if you have any infection, what you do is you take antibiotics, and if you are not given antibiotics, and any, if you're going through a bigger surgery, before any big surgery, you are given antibiotics because all the, the bacteria or the infecting agents which are there in your body, they are suppressed through antibiotics. Now, if that doesn't happen, means you are really prone to infections, right? And this is a huge concern. Now, what happened, until 5 years back, uh, there is a pharmaceutical effluent aspect of of antibiotics, of antimicrobial resistance, which means that any company or any pharmaceutical company which is manufacturing antibiotics, they have a waste discharge as well, because any company or any factory would have that. So if you are a company or a pharma company which is manufacturing pharmaceutical or sorry, antibiotic products, the waste will have antibiotics in it, right? Now, in many parts of India and China, what was happening is that that waste was getting, discharged in open fields or rivers, in like local water streams. And what was seen in those areas is that, kids who are born, not only adults who had resistant to antibiotics, newborns were resistant to a lot of antibiotics. Now the problem was, it was really alarming because a newborn who is resistant to antibiotics, which means the longevity of life is really, kind of, is questionable in those cases. In those cases, now what happened was we had to educate the government of India about it. Now, because India did not have a policy, we did have some bits of AMR policy. We didn't recognize the effluent discharge or the pharmaceutical aspect of AMR in our India's AMR plan. So now the responsibility was on, policy people like us. So we had to do like this entire advocacy campaign. We worked with the government of India, It took us close to 2 years to convince the government that, fine, many other countries don't have these kind of policies, only because the largest or the 90% of production is happening only in India and China. And hence, if any other country abroad do not have a policy, it really doesn't matter to them. But it does really matter to India to have a policy like that. It took us 2 years on the advocacy, but we were really, successful in shaping that conversation in India at the political level, with the ministry level. And in 2017, in fact, government, released the AMR policy, and they had very particularly, focused on the pharmaceutical effluent part as well, which mandated all pharma companies in India to adhere to certain standards which the government had laid down for such companies. you know because prior to that, imagine, we are hub of pharmaceuticals and we didn't have these policies, and it was really impacting the environment. So the kind of impact, again, I think, maybe, I don't know if that this really answers your question, but the impact that we can make is that, we can help our stakeholders identify that, see, these are the problem areas, these are the gap areas, these are the evidences, that I'm trying to tell you, that this is the evidence through which I can tell you that, see, this is the problem, and these are my solutions as well. So when you give a problem to somebody in policy space, also come with plausible solutions as well, right? So this is the kind of impact you can make. And similarly, I have worked on the rare disease policy in India. So in last 10 years, again, we were really struggling to convince the government that India needs a rare disease policy. But yes, it's just 3 to 4 months back that, we were able to finally get the policy in India out. So it was a journey that we had, the external stakeholders, as we had with the government of India. But yes, we were able to convince the government that yes, it is a really important area and we have the policy now. And government also gave us the opportunity to give our recommendations that government really incorporated in the policy itself. So yeah, these are the kind of maybe the impacts that, we can look at.
Right. Thank you so much, Nalini. Ruchika, I hope it's clear the type of impact that you can actually
And
create.
in fact, sorry to interrupt, bleed
No
equal,
problem.
I just talked about,
Yeah.
the impact that we can make is that, we can talk about the areas that no one else is talking about.
Yes.
Because in policy, what really happens, because policy is also an interplay of politics, right? Be it at local level, be it at global level. So a lot of work that is being done is dependent on the funding. So wherever the funds are, and that it's not a wrong thing, because you need survival of your programs, and hence funding becomes really important. But then the ironical part is that many a times certain conversations get left out, and those conversations are also equally important. So as a policy maker, and Bleed Equal, is a big example of that. I mean, my quest is to also, give focus to those conversations as well, which are getting, sort of sidelined in the entire conversation of menstrual health. So hence, your public policy, is actually a great tool with which you can make an impact at a societal level.
Right. Indeed, like I think Bleed Equal is one of those really prospective and inspiring spaces that we all look forward to, Nalini, and we also wish you the best, for
Thank,
for,
thank you
for
so much.
really building Bleed Equal up. One, kind of final, I would say, question before we try to summarize our discussion for the day will be, within your understanding, Nalini, as you have experienced pursuing a program in public policy and then starting to work post your education, how do you foresee the hiring trends in the sector? We would love to know, like you say, from your comfort zones also, like
Yeah.
where do you see like companies, organizations, recruiters um, looking towards public policy graduates in the
Yeah.
days to come?
Right. So, I mean, just to clarify, is the question about the kind of skills we look at when we are hiring, or the trend that, sort of where it is going? If you could
Yes,
just
I think,
clarify that
yeah,
part.
you can mix and match both if you want, because I think skills you spoke earlier.
Yeah.
So we would love to know that, like, how do you see more sectors or industries coming in, right? And
Okay, so
wanting
I
to,
yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, after you.
wanting to create, say, job positions or job titles
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
public policy graduates.
Right. Okay. So, okay, I think I would again like to, I think partially I would also again want to go back to the skill sets, and then, I'll be able to tell better about the trends, because
Yeah.
the trends are again increasing. The trends are also diversifying, because if you see a lot of policy people, and, personally, even me, we work at the level of communications as well. Many a times we drive media communications also. And we are able to do that only because we understand public policy. So again, tracing this entire conversation back, I think there are two things that I really feel, which are again non-negotiable for a professional who is entering a public policy field. And this is something, what I also look at when I'm also hiring. Because when I'm hiring, I know if I'm hiring a fresh graduate, a person's application, again they will learn once they come on board, and once they start interacting with the different actors that my organization is interacting, be it government, be it international stakeholders, be it individual influencers, doctors. We interact with a lot of pharma companies and with a lot of doctors. We interact with media people, health journalists. So the application of whatever the skill set that they have learned, they will learn once they come on board. However, I think what I really see in the students is that intersectionality, because for example, like I've been talking about, viewing health from different disciplines, right? And I think anyone, if even if you're working in environment space, even if you're working in child rights space, if you're working in intellectual property space, whichever space you are working on, intersectionality is really important. Now, what is intersectionality? It is just looking at one policy problem from different areas. Now, if I'm looking at health, I would expect the student to understand health from rural background. What are the urban health challenges? I want the person to know very basic about the politics of health. I want the person to also understand, the legal aspects of health. What and little, of course, very basic sciences of health. Of course, not in like a very nuanced manner. And then I mean anything that comes under the lens of intersectionality. Cultural aspects of health are also very different. And the societal aspects of health are also very different. So I mean these are certain things where health is at the intersection of all of these different things, and an interaction of or an interplay of all of these factors is what really defines your health goals. So all I see in an individual is that how much they are able to, or how much basic understanding they have, that or that they can apply to a problem that is given to them. So we give a lot of case studies to students, and those case studies show that you can understand, or you can define, or you can interpret the problem from all of these multiple angles, right? So for example, if I tell you that um, bleed equal, and I want to, this is a problem, and then I want you to map the stakeholders. So the what I really want in a student to understand that government stakeholders are equally important to a problem like bleed equal or a menstrual health. Doctors are also important. Development sector is also important. Then the international program, your sustainable development goals are also important. So a person who is able to see menstrual health from all of these lenses is what is really important. And we are not asking that you should know all the integrities of it. No, all you should know is that if you are given a policy problem, assess that policy problem from all of these different dimensions. And your sustainable development goals, like I said, is a beautiful example of that, because what are sustainable development goals? UN is only trying to is striving for a sustainable world, and that sustainable world is dependent on fulfillment of 17 goals. Now, if you look at those 17 goals, something is on health, something is on environment, something is on labor rights as well, something is on gender equality, right? That is intersectionality, because sustainable development is at the center, and that can only have happen when all of these other goals that are revolving around it are fulfilled or are achieved. Now, everything is interdependent. everything is multidimensional, and all of these things are intersectional. And this is just the basic thing, I think, that as a policy professional we should just understand how to apply all of these things. You will learn once you enter your professional journey, but just understand that these are the things which are really important. Two, I think, is policy communications, because now when I told you about the stakeholders, you would be interacting with the government, you would be interacting with subject experts, you would be interacting with doctors or environment specialists or anybody. You would be also interacting with media, you would be also interacting with academia, people who are in the academics, but experts in certain field or area. Many a times you might also be interacting with lawyers. What if you are working in the environment field, and that is being taken up, the case is being taken by the National Green Tribunal? Then as a policy person you would be talking to a lawyer as well. Now policy communication becomes really important in that area, because understand that public policy has a spectrum. There are spectrum of issues, there are spectrum of stakeholders, there are spectrum of institutions that you would be interacting with. And all of these institutions and actors who are placed in different areas across your spectrum, they talk different language. So all of us are trying to achieve a same goal, right? Government is trying to achieve a same goal of a policy as much as you are trying to achieve. However, we all speak different language. For example, again going back to the example of antimicrobial resistance, government also wanted the policy. As a policy maker, I also needed the policy. As a doctor, they also needed the policy. As an environment expert, as a pharmaceutical company, we all needed the policy. However, the kind of language a pharma company would speak would be different as compared to an environmentalist would be talking on the same issue, as compared to the government person who would be talking. So a nuanced understanding of the kind of language different stakeholders speak is really important, right? Because that is a skill that not many people have. And I think that's one thing that I feel is really important for anybody who's in a public policy field should have. Now, having said that, where is the trajectory going? Trajectory is really growing. First of all, it is really diversifying as well, because every company, be it a private company or any development sector organization, any NGO, or any multilateral organization as well, and patient, or maybe some stakeholder groups, or some industry alliances, in fact, also everybody now understands public policy. They also all understand, and they have recognized the need of professionals like us, right? Now, for example, every corporate, even Google for that matter, or Facebook or LinkedIn, they have government affairs specialist as one of the main position. So who is a government affairs specialist? It's a public policy person largely, or maybe a lawyer, or so the demand is increasing. But all, right, like I said right in the beginning, if the demand is increasing, the expectation of the skill set is also increasing, because if you are placed in a corporate sector, the skill set might vary just a little, or the creativity that might be expected out of you would be slightly different from how you're placed in the development sector. However, I think the demand is really increasing, so I think the student should just be very well versed with the current developments of the sector. And I think, yeah, so there are a lot of opportunities, in fact, that one can kind of explore in a field like public policy.
Right. Thank you. I think that's good news for all of us. And we also look forward, maybe in the near future, like Bleed Equal also becomes, I'm sure, the one of the hiring partners across the public policy schools. And I'm sure those days are not too far away from all of us. But thank you so much, Nalini, for this amazing hour that you spent with us sharing your stories, essentially because what I am almost like, I would say, like, I'm very keen to see the entire space of menstrual health and hygiene shaping up and evolving. I think the questions that you have asked are questions which all of us in this session, I'm sure, would love to take it forward to. We
Yeah.
would love to ask, our own near and dear ones, our own stakeholders, our own, teachers, our colleagues, and I guess a lot can be churned out in terms of the data points that you're looking out for, which you mentioned is clearly not yet the priority
Yeah.
of many institutions, right? The second important thing, which definitely is significant, is the funding space. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
funding space, and I'm remembering the space of CSR. I'm remembering the space of philanthropy,
Yeah.
the development sector support
Yeah.
overall. Um, like we would love to see that more organizations, individuals, they come forward to um, constructively finance the
Yeah.
menstrual health and hygiene space, right? Because a lot of times the word support can be very broad, but we would
Yeah.
rather like to
See it more
be very, yeah,
tangibly.
be more tangible, that we're
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
forward to financing the
Yeah.
sector. We are looking forward to also understand the financial landscape in the
Right. Right.
menstrual health and hygiene, right?
No,
Because
absolutely.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, after you. Yes. Sorry.
No, I think I would love to share an example
Yeah.
because we have seen, Nalini, many organizations very keen to work in the sustainable space also of
Yeah.
menstrual health and
Yeah.
hygiene.
Right.
You beautifully helped us realize and visualize the sustainable development goals of the UN,
Yeah.
and how it is nothing but the intersectionality,
Yes.
maybe in a more vivid format, in a more
Right.
colorful format, right? uh,
Absolutely.
Yes. So I guess organizations who are also interested or have been trying to work in that space, um, Bleed Equal will be such a strong component in their uh, advocacy support ecosystem, as well
Right.
as, I'm kind of visualizing it as a financial conduit, right? In which we can
Absolutely.
channelize the money to the
Absolutely,
policy.
absolutely. I completely agree with you on that. And I think, first of all, thank you for, visualizing Bleed Equal, from that perspective. And I think, because you yourself are very well versed with the social science and the sciences space, and the kind of environment you deal with, I think you're able to understand, the relevance of the gap areas that, because of which the journey of Bleed Equal started. And I think, yes, absolutely, it would be a pleasure to, also hear back from the students, because in fact I would love to have, because in the near future we are starting certain programs, so it would be great to hear from the students and how they are interested, sort of, to contribute to the subject. That's one. Two, in fact, just next week, in fact, all our social media handles, specifically, of Bleed Equal, be it Instagram or LinkedIn, we would be starting, certain programs that, I think from Monday or Tuesday onwards, we are starting. So we are beginning with, certain surveys and certain, review questions as well. However, that is going to be taking shape, more tangible shape, in form of, some stakeholder conversations, and some capacity building program, etc. And I think our social media handle would be talking more, from the next week, or from Monday or
Right,
Tuesday onwards, about that.
right.
So it will be also great that, if anyone, who's watching us and who's listening to us, would contribute to those conversations, because that is where and how we get the data. So when we say the data is missing, I mean, that's we are leveraging the social media currently to, get the data.
Right. I think that's very interesting. We would love to create a mechanism, Nalini, where we would love to share the happenings at Bleed Equal as
Yeah.
and when it comes with the participants. We would
Right.
definitely invite all of you to be part of the conversation. I am
Absolutely.
already confirming my attendance and presence for sure. I would love to participate.
Right.
I would love to share my viewpoints, being someone uh, who have actually seen people very close to me menstruate, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the data points start emerging, and
Yeah,
we will. Uh, I'm very certain very soon uh, we come to that day where the government, the private, the public, everyone will be on a consensus to
absolutely.
finance the menstrual health and hygiene space.
And I think more than that, it is very basic that, all I want to do is just open up the conversation on menstruation because, and the way we open up that conversation is right here, me talking about menstruation, because it is such a taboo subject that, we don't even want to talk about it. So if by medium of today's talk, also, if I'm able to tell people that, it is absolutely normal to talk about menstruation or menstrual health, because it was equally any health, it's equally, or it's similar to any other health subject that we talk about. And if you're able to have those conversations with people at home, because let's not limit this conversation or only to women, because this is equally a conversation of men, equally a conversation of trans people, as much as it is, has been designated to women. So I think that is my larger aim. Before we do anything, before I get the data, before I get people on board, anything, for me the main point is just let us just talk about menstruation. Let us just normalize the conversation the way we have other conversations at home, or just we how we talk about cancer or diabetes or any health subject. Menstruation is as normal as that. Okay, like of course those are disease areas and this is not a disease, but all I'm trying to say that how we have normalized any other conversation of health, let us also normalize menstrual health as well in our common nomenclature, in our common articulation.
Right. Thank you so much. I think we look forward to these exercises and to this participation very, very soon.
My pleasure.
I would love to thank all the participants who turned up for the session today and shared your questions also. We will also be sharing a feedback form with all of you very soon. Of course, in the feedback form, we would like to capture more questions, queries. If you are
Right.
interested to know more about Bleed Equal, you want to participate, you want to engage with them, you want to talk about the subject more across the spaces you belong to, feel free to write to us. So you will get all those contact details, including the contacts of Nalini as well as Bleed Equal in that feedback form itself, which we should be disseminating from Monday onwards, right? So thanks a lot, students, participants, aspirants, for turning up. Nalini, we can't thank you enough. This has been such a stimulating discussion. Um, we
No, no,
truly appreciate.
absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Sarveshwar, and it's like a total pleasure from my end as well to be here today to interact with all the students, because I know how, because whatever I've spoken today might sound very natural and very easy. It is not, because my own journey in public policy space, I remember I started as a confused kid. When I was out of a dental school, I was equally confused. When I was in law school, I was like, okay, where will this take me? And I did my internship in rural area, I did my internship with corporate, I did my internship with a research organization, because I was just only exploring, because I didn't have the right answer with me, so I know how daunting the whole journey can be, because it is not a well laid, domain as such, and it will never be. That's the beauty, or that's the also the equally the complexity of the area is. So as much as naturally I've spoken, as much as with ease I've spoken about the about everything that I've spoken about today, it's not, it doesn't, it's the journey is not that easy. And I do understand that many students, they face that confusion that how, why is it so different from academics to when we land in the job. So I think from that perspective, anything that I spoke today, if it resonated with students at any level, it's indeed a pleasure that I was able to today contribute to that kind of conversation by medium of this platform. And like you said, I'm happy to hear back from the students to get the feedback, just in case they want to know more about any other aspects or anything in public policy, or if they want to learn more about advocacy and how it is done, etc. I mean, I'll try to, because I know I just how the schedule is, but as much as I'm able to, I would love to give them the answers
Right. Thank you
to
so
see
much. I
their
think so. So that truly sums it up for the day. That this interaction is not the end, but the start of many, many important and pertinent conversations with Nalini and her work, her love, her focus, her vision with health policy advocacy, menstrual health and hygiene, and of course, bleed equal. On that note, we will leave you with more discussions in the future. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Stay well, stay safe, follow the COVID protocols, and do write to us for any queries so that we can support you back. Thank you for supporting us at Catalyst. Thank you so much, Nalini, once more. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.